Hi, Lauren. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you and hearing, having you share about your experience of working together.
No, thank you so much for having me. And I can't thank you enough for the work that we've done together. I think there are some really incredible things that we've accomplished in our time. And I feel so changed in the way that I relate to food and how punishing I used to be to myself, and how much lighter I feel now when any of those situations arise. So just want to say thank you off the top. Initially, I was really just looking for nutritional information. I've been on a fitness journey for a long time. I was wondering if I was eating enough calories and the right foods. I approached it almost more of a check the box. And it was only after we had our initial curious conversation that it completely flipped the script on what I understood this process could be. And it went from being very scientific and surface level to an incredible introspective journey that really unlayered so much from my childhood, from the way that society causes us to relate to our bodies, how our families have influenced us and our friends, and all of these with seemingly unconscious elements that contributed to some of the destructive behaviors that I've always had with food, but didn't even realize I could tackle. I just thought, this is just my problem. There's no way of getting around it. Learn to deal with it and optimize what I can on my fitness journey. Um, but instead, after we spoke, I felt completely rocked and realized that there was so much more work that could be done and that I don't actually have to live this way and to have this, this quote unquote alter ego of a monster that is just attacking and binging on food with reckless abandon and no conscious processing while that's happening. And then tons of guilt and self blame afterward. It's, just such a vicious cycle that I had always lived through. And after we spoke together, I realized that didn't necessarily have to be my future, which was incredible. And as far as what I was hoping to get out of the program, again, sort of my initial hopes were shattered from that original conversation. I realized I was totally focused on the wrong things and that optimizing was just, again, sort of just a shell in my head. And I was still holding on to all of this old baggage with food. So when we started talking, I mean, I had this very distant, what seemed like a long shot hope of kind of releasing these chains and maybe having less anxiety over food. And in particular for me, I am so in the box with how I typically eat that anytime I would go out to eat with friends or go on vacation and have long sprints that were out of my in the box food and had to make choices on a menu, my food anxiety was off the charts. And I noticed that my other friends didn't always seem to have the same sort of struggle that I did. They seemed more free to make different choices and happier and less distracted by that whole process overall. And my hope in working together from the start was that maybe I could be a little bit more like that and take away some of the negative self-talk and this vicious cycle that I created where maybe if I was out with friends, I wasn't eating bad food, but then I would come home and I would eat everything in my fridge. And maybe all of that was good food, but the volume that I was eating was just binge eating and it was totally emotional. And so I was hoping to shed, some of those not only those habits, but also better understand the underlying emotions that really contributed to it, because it's not simple. Food is at the heart of how we relate to other people. It's the centerpiece for so many things that we do socially. And so understanding my layered existence with food and relationship to food really kind of blew the door open on how I get to approach my friends, my family, my social life in general. And it's very relieving. Yeah, I mean, every day is a different struggle and a conversation with yourself, but that is the key difference. I'm now having an actual conversation with myself, and it's gaining that layer of self-awareness and not just sort of throwing everything to reckless abandon saying, "Oh, I'm being taken by this food monster," and leading with, pure emotion. In our work together, it enabled me to take a step back and say, okay, why do you have this craving and this inclination to binge right now? Or is it the end all be all if you have something that is not in the box on a menu when you're out with friends? And I think that that really was one of the biggest relief points for me. I had placed such an all or nothing mentality in my approach to food, and that carried out whether I was, at home by myself or I was out with friends. And I was always trying to walk this tightrope of staying super healthy and thinking that that was going to make me happy, or that was what was comfortable or all my body could handle. It was sort of a catastrophized view of eating. And in approaching it differently and taking it as a testing of behaviors, like not just all or nothing, but okay, you think this is what will happen to you, but let's put a hypothesis out there, or just practice something else and then see what happens. And that approach really was so relieving because it took off so much pressure. And I also realized in having a lot of practice that I wasn't getting the negative consequences that I was expecting. I thought if I went, off the rails and, ordered fries, then I'm going to gain all this weight and, backtrack. And honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. It seemed that the more I gave myself grace and tried to focus more on enjoyment with friends and what I might actually want instead of what I should have, that I was binging less when I was by myself. I didn't have those constant cravings, which were so much more social and emotional than actual hunger. And I may have actually lost more weight in the process, which was not an intended goal, but ended up happening. So it's sort of funny how I thought by limiting myself, I was doing this great good, and it turns out that by freeing myself, I was even closer to my actual goal of, you know, losing weight or being more fit or what have you. So it really it was shocking to me after 30 plus years of living in what I thought I understood what my lane was, and then realizing that's not actually how it has to be. I can live differently. I was eating different foods, but I was probably eating less at the end of the day, because if you eat an entire bag or container of something just because it's a diet food doesn't mean that calorically it's not 3 times as dense as just having a normal meal at a restaurant, or having, just enjoying yourself without it being like a giant portion. Like I had totally, flipped that around in my mind where there had to be some sort of withdrawal, but that this, other group of food was somehow safe. Um, and it turned out that was more of a cage, emotional cage than anything else. And so that was all me indulging by myself, and I'm actually such a social creature, and connection with other people is what fuels me. So, changing my indulgences to being completely by myself to actually prioritizing that for time when I'm with friends and to think of how it can be fun. I'm craving way less. I'm less restricted. I'm enjoying the food that I'm eating more, and I'm having better experiences overall because there isn't this constant tension of, ooh, I shouldn't eat that, or no, I don't want to share that thing. Now I can just let go a bit more and be more adventurous and be more connected to the people that I'm with instead of the voice in my head.